The Nasat Armada materialized in Earth's orbit, filling the sky with 1,000 warships. Arthur Kennedy checked the status of his secret weapon one last time. The untested device could save Earth, or doom it. Kennedy watched alien dropships descend toward panicked cities as the Armada issued its ultimatum: total surrender or annihilation. With steady hands, he initiated the weapon's activation sequence. The underground laboratory rumbled. Power surged into alien technology, salvaged from Roswell's remains. A beam of blinding energy erupted through miles of rock, parting clouds as it lanced toward the heart of the Nasat fleet. The world held its breath. But the searing light never reached the alien ships. In a flash, the Armada vanished, retreating to the stars as suddenly as it had appeared. Humanity blinked, stupefied by its inexplicable salvation. As news spread, Kennedy was hailed as Earth's savior, the genius who had scared off an unstoppable foe. Yet no one knew the truth. The weapon was a desperate bluff. Its alien components were burnt out, inert. Kennedy's deception had worked, but for how long? World leaders scrambled for answers, desperate to understand the Armada's retreat. Was it a final warning before a future attack? Or had the planet killer rattled the galactic status quo? An urgent summons from the Galactic Council, an entity unknown to humankind, left no doubt. Kennedy and a team of diplomats would journey to an alien forum, navigating a cosmic political web they barely understood. They would be the face of a daring species who had stumbled onto the interstellar stage, a species whose first act had been brandishing a phantom gun at the galaxy's head. Kennedy's actions had bought Earth a respite from invasion, but at what cost? As he prepared for a tribunal that would decide humanity's fate, a hidden enemy plotted revenge. Somewhere in the silent void, spurned Nasat commanders seethed, unwilling to let the insult of their retreat go unanswered. The planet killer had been a bluff, but the next human weapon would be very real, if Kennedy could build it in time. In the depths of a secure government facility, Dr. Eliza Hoffman pored over the data from the planet killer's activation. The numbers danced across her screen, painting a picture that sent a chill down her spine. The weapon had been a masterful bluff, a desperate gamble that had somehow paid off. But as she traced the energy signatures and the system readouts, the truth became inescapable. The planet killer was nothing more than an elaborate light show. Hoffman leaned back in her chair, the weight of this revelation pressing down on her. She had worked alongside Arthur Kennedy for years, had believed in his vision of a weapon that could defend Earth against any threat. Now, as the illusion crumbled before her eyes, she found herself at a crossroads. To reveal the truth would be to shatter the fragile peace that Kennedy's deception had bought them. But to maintain the lie, could she live with herself, knowing that she had betrayed the very principles of scientific integrity that had guided her entire career? Light years away, on the shimmering spires of the Galactic Council's headquarters, Zoran Tarkum studied the incoming reports with a calculating eye. The human delegation was en route, led by the enigmatic Arthur Kennedy himself. Tarkum had heard the whispers, the tales of a species that had dared to stand against the might of the Nasat Armada. And at the center of it all, the planet killer, a weapon that had sent shockwaves through the galactic community. But Tarkum was no fool. He had risen through the ranks of Nasat diplomacy by mastering the art of the deal, of reading between the lines and exploiting the weaknesses of his opponents. And as he delved into the limited data on the planet killer, he began to see the cracks in the human story. There was something off, something that didn't quite add up. And if he could expose it, well, the Nasat had been humiliated by their retreat. They would be all too eager to reclaim their pride. As Kennedy and his team boarded the sleek interstellar craft that would carry them to the council, they were unaware of the eyes that watched their every move. Hidden in the shadows, the broker observed the proceedings with a detached interest. For years, he had been a ghost, a whisper on the lips of those who dabbled in the galaxy's darkest secrets. And now, as the planet killer threatened to upset the delicate balance of power, he saw an opportunity. The broker's web stretched far and wide, a network of spies and operatives that spanned the stars. And as he set his plans in motion, he knew that the coming days would be crucial. The human delegation would be walking into a nest of vipers, a world of alien politics and hidden agendas. They would need allies, need information, if they were to have any hope of success, and the broker would be there, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Kennedy felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as the ship hurtled through the void. He had bought Earth a reprieve, had given humanity a chance to catch its breath, but he knew that it was only the beginning. The Nasat would be back, and they would be hungry for revenge. And if the truth about the planet killer were to be revealed, he didn't want to think about the consequences. But there was no turning back now. As the ship approached the Council's headquarters, Kennedy steeled himself for the trials ahead. He would have to be at the top of his game, would have to navigate the treacherous waters of alien diplomacy with all the skill and cunning he could muster. For the fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy itself, would be decided in the coming days. And failure was not an option. The Galactic Council's chamber buzzed with tension as Kennedy and his team took their seats. Alien delegates from 100 worlds filled the vast amphitheater, their whispers and clicks creating a cacophony of anticipation. Zoran Tarkum, the Nasat diplomat, rose to address the assembly. His compound eyes glinted with barely concealed hostility as he fixed his gaze on Kennedy. "Esteemed colleagues," Tarakum's voice boomed through the chamber, "we stand at a precipice. The humans claim to possess a weapon of unimaginable power, yet offer no proof. I demand they demonstrate the planet killer's capabilities or admit to their deceit." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kennedy felt sweat beating on his forehead as he scrambled for a response. Before he could speak, a melodic voice cut through the din. "Perhaps we should consider the context of Earth's actions." All eyes turned to the source, a willowy, ethereal being whose skin shimmered with bioluminescence. "I am Zephyr Starsong of the Etheri Collective," the alien continued. "While we do not condone the development of such weapons, we must acknowledge the aggressive stance the Nasat have taken. Does not every species have the right to defend itself?" The chamber erupted into heated debate. As diplomats argued, Kennedy noticed movement in the shadows. A hooded figure slipped through a side door, followed by several others. Something about their furtive movements set his nerves on edge. Unbeknownst to Kennedy, Elias Raven and his Eidolon collective team had breached the Council's security systems. They worked furiously to decrypt files buried deep within the archives. "Sir," one of Raven's operatives whispered urgently, "you need to see this." Raven's eyes widened as he scanned the decrypted data. Well, he murmured. "It seems our Nasat friends have been keeping secrets of their own." Back in the council chamber, Zoran Tarkum pressed his attack. "The human delegate Arthur Kennedy is clearly unstable," he declared. "Just yesterday, he was seen ranting about alien conspiracies in the diplomatic quarter." Kennedy frowned, confused. He had spent the entire previous day in meetings with his team. As more accusations flew, a sickening realization dawned. Someone was systematically undermining his credibility. On Earth, Dr. Eliza Hoffman stared at her computer screen, her face pale. An encrypted message from a high-ranking government official named Damian Blackwood blinked on the display. "Continue planet killer development immediately. National security priority. Failure to comply will result in severe consequences." Hoffman's hands shook as she closed the message. The weight of her knowledge that the planet killer was a fraud threatened to crush her. As the council's deliberations reached a fever pitch, Elias Raven burst into the chamber, flanked by his team. He strode directly to the central podium, ignoring the shouts of protest. "Honored delegates," Raven's voice cut through the chaos, "I have evidence that will change everything we thought we knew about this conflict." He activated a holographic display, projecting ancient Nasat texts into the air. "The Nasat retreat wasn't just about the planet killer," Raven explained. "It triggered a deep-seated cultural fear, a prophecy of their civilization's downfall at the hands of a world-ending weapon." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Kennedy's mind raced, seeing a path forward where moments ago there had been none. In the shadows, the broker watched with satisfaction as the seeds of discord he had planted began to bloom. The Galactic Council was fracturing before his eyes, and in the chaos, new opportunities would arise. As accusations flew and alliances shifted, Kennedy realized the true battle was just beginning. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy itself, would be decided not by weapons, but by the cunning and dedication of those who dared to shape the future. As the council chamber erupted into chaos, Kennedy felt a subtle vibration against his wrist. He glanced down at his communication device, eyes widening at the encrypted message that flashed across its surface. Excusing himself from the pandemonium, he slipped into a nearby alcove, heart pounding as he decrypted the transmission. The message was brief, but its implications were staggering. NASAD appearance at Earth, orchestrated deception, council compromised, trust no one. Kennedy's mind raced. If this was true, it changed everything. He scanned the chamber, seeing the familiar faces of alien delegates in a new light. Who among them was complicit in this elaborate ruse? As he contemplated his next move, a gentle touch on his arm made him start. Zephyr Starsong stood beside him, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with concern. "You look troubled, Arthur Kennedy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps we should speak privately." Nodding, Kennedy followed the ethereal diplomat through a labyrinth of corridors, finally emerging in a secluded garden. The air was thick with the scent of alien flora, a kaleidoscope of colors surrounding them. "I fear we have all been manipulated," Kennedy began, showing Zephyr the encrypted message. The ethereal's eyes widened. "This aligns with certain suspicions my people have harbored. We must act quickly, but cautiously." Over the next hours, Kennedy and Zephyr conducted a series of clandestine meetings, reaching out to potential allies among the council delegates. Trust was a precious commodity, each interaction fraught with the possibility of betrayal. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Eliza Hoffman stood before the imposing gates of a newly constructed facility. The air crackled with energy, a palpable sense of secrecy surrounding the compound. She presented her credentials to the stern-faced guards, fighting to keep her expression neutral as she was ushered inside. The cavernous interior buzzed with activity. Scientists and engineers hunched over complex equipment, their faces illuminated by holographic displays. At the center of it all stood Damian Blackwood, his eyes gleaming with barely held-back excitement. "Dr. Hoffman," he greeted her, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Welcome to Project Phoenix. Here we will turn the planet killer from myth into reality." Hoffman's stomach churned as she surveyed the facility. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering. As Blackwood led her on a tour, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Back at the Galactic Council, a new voice cut through the ongoing debates. Ravek, a towering figure with metallic skin that seemed to absorb light, addressed the assembly. "Esteemed colleagues," the Praetorian's voice resonated with authority, "we cannot allow this planet killer to exist, even in theory. I propose immediate action. Earth must dismantle this project or face the consequences." The chamber erupted once more, delegates shouting their agreement or protest. Kennedy watched as alliances shifted before his eyes, the council fracturing along new lines. In the shadows of the council chamber, Elias Raven and his team worked feverishly. Their covert infiltration of the council's systems had yielded results beyond their wildest expectations. Raven's eyes widened as he decrypted a series of communications between high-ranking NASAD officials and members of a secretive Praetorian faction. "Sir," one of his operatives whispered urgently, "you need to see this. It's not just about the planet killer anymore. This goes much deeper." As Raven absorbed the implications of their discovery, he knew they were racing against time. The hope of the universe hung in the balance, and the truth lay hidden beneath layers of deception and betrayal. Across the stars, in a facility known only to a select few, the broker set his plan in motion. Operatives moved silently through the shadows, their goal clear: infiltrate the heart of the Praetorian-NASAD alliance and uncover the truth about the planet killer. As the various factions maneuvered and plotted, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shape the future of the galaxy. The lines between ally and enemy blurred, and in the growing darkness, the spark of conflict threatened to ignite an inferno that would consume them all. The council chamber erupted into chaos as Ravek's denial echoed through the vast space. Delegates shouted accusations and demands, their voices blending into a cacophony of outrage and confusion. Kennedy gripped the edges of his podium, his knuckles tightening as he surveyed the scene. "Order! We must have order!" The council speaker's amplified voice cut through the din, but the pandemonium continued unabated. Kennedy caught Zephyr Starsong's eye across the chamber. The Aetheri's bioluminescent skin pulsed rapidly, a clear sign of distress. He nodded almost imperceptibly, and they began to make their way through the throng of agitated delegates. As they navigated the crowd, Kennedy's comm device vibrated. He glanced down to see an urgent message from Elias Raven. "Broker's team successful. Planet killer plans in enemy hands. Nasat-Praetorian collaboration confirmed." Kennedy's blood ran cold. He grabbed Zephyr's arm, pulling her close. "We need to act now," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the commotion. Zephyr nodded, her luminescent eyes narrowing. "I have an idea, but it's risky." Without warning, she glided to the center of the chamber, her ethereal form commanding attention. As she began to speak, her melodic voice carried an undercurrent of steel. "Esteemed colleagues," Zephyr's words cut through the noise, silencing the chamber. "We stand on the brink of catastrophe, but there is a path forward. I propose a joint human-alien task force to investigate these allegations and tenacity the planet killer crisis." The chamber fell silent for a moment before erupting once more, this time with a mix of support and vehement opposition. Zoran Tarkum, the Nasat diplomat, pushed his way to the front. "This is preposterous," he sputtered, his compound eyes flashing with anger. "Such a task force would undermine the very foundation of this council." As the debate raged, Kennedy noticed a new group entering the chamber. Their movements were fluid, almost predatory, and they exuded an aura of scarcely controlled power. The lead figure, a tall, gaunt being with iridescent scales, approached the central podium. "We are the Krilnar Consortium," the being announced, its voice a sibilant whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "We offer our assistance in this matter. Our intelligence networks are vast, our resources unparalleled. We can provide information on this Praetorian Nasat alliance for a price." Kennedy felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Elias Raven, his face grim. "Be careful, Arthur," Raven murmured. "The Krilnar are dangerous. They're after something bigger than just a council seat." As the political maneuvering intensified, Kennedy's mind raced. The planet killer plans were out there, being reverse-engineered even now. Earth was in danger, the galaxy on the brink of war. They needed to act, and fast. He locked eyes with Zephyr across the chamber and nodded. It was time for bold action. "I second the proposal for a joint task force," Kennedy announced, his voice ringing out clear and confident. "And I volunteer to lead it alongside Zephyr Starsong." The chamber exploded into a frenzy of shouts and arguments. But amidst the chaos, alliances were forming, plans taking shape. Kennedy knew that soon, he and a hand-picked team would be venturing into the heart of enemy territory, racing against time to uncover the truth and prevent disaster. As the council session adjourned in disarray, Kennedy received another urgent communication. This time, it was from Earth. Dr. Eliza Hoffman's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of fear and dedication. "Arthur," she said, her voice low and urgent, "you need to know what's happening here. Damian Blackwood, he's accelerating the Planet Killer project, and he's brought in someone new, a scientist named Serena Vale. She's brilliant, but I'm afraid of what she might be capable of." Kennedy's fist tight. The situation was spiraling out of control on multiple fronts. As he ended the call, he saw Raven approaching, his face grim. "We've got another problem," Raven said, his voice tight. "One of our terraforming colonies has been experiencing incidents. We think it might be connected to all of this." Kennedy nodded, his mind already formulating plans. They would need to split their forces, investigate multiple threads simultaneously. The task force, the Earth situation, the colony. It was all connected, he was sure of it. As he gathered his team for a briefing, Kennedy couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a precipice. One false move and everything would come crashing down. But there was no time for doubt. They had a galaxy to save. Kennedy's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the assembled team. Human operatives from the Eidolon Collective stood shoulder to shoulder with Aetheri warriors, their faces grim and determined. Zephyr Starsong's bioluminescence pulsed with a steady, focused rhythm. "We move in 5, Kennedy said, his voice low. "Remember, stealth is paramount. We can't afford to alert them to our presence until we've secured the prototype." The air shimmered as advanced cloaking technology enveloped the strike team. They moved like ghosts through the night, approaching the Praetorian Nasat facility. Massive energy barriers hummed, but the team slipped through undetected, exploiting a vulnerability Raven's intel had uncovered. Inside, the facility bustled with activity. Praetorian guards patrolled while Nasat scientists scurried between workstations. At the center of it all stood a massive, pulsing orb, the Planet Killer prototype. Kennedy's breath caught in his throat. The weapon's power was palpable, an oppressive weight in the air. He signaled to Zephyr, who nodded and directed her Aetheri warriors to disable the facility's defenses. Alarms blared as the strike team sprang into action. Kennedy and his human operatives fought their way to the prototype, neutralizing guards with precision. Zephyr's team worked in perfect synchronization, their movements fluid and deadly. "We're in!" shouted one of the Eidolon techs, fingers flying over a control panel. The Planet Killer's containment field flickered and died. Kennedy approached the weapon, his hand hovering over its surface. "Let's get this thing out of here." A thunderous explosion rocked the facility. Through the smoke and debris emerged a squad of heavily armed Krillnar mercenaries, their scaled skin glinting in the emergency lights. "Extraction's compromised," Zephyr called out, her voice tight with tension. "We need to move now." The air filled with plasma fire as Kennedy's team engaged the Krillnar. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but fought with desperate intensity. An Aetheri warrior fell, then another. A human operative took a blast to the chest, his body crumpling to the floor. Kennedy gritted his teeth, firing his weapon with one hand while helping guide the anti-gravity platform carrying the Planet Killer. Zephyr's lieutenant, a tall Aetheri named Lyra, provided cover fire. "Go!" Lyra shouted, her bioluminescence flaring bright. "I'll hold them off!" Before Kennedy could protest, Lyra charged the Krillnar position. Her sacrifice bought them the precious seconds needed to reach their extraction point. As they fled the facility, the sounds of battle faded behind them. Kennedy's team had succeeded, but at a terrible cost. The prototype was secure, but the price in blood had been steep. Days later, Kennedy stood before the Galactic Council, his face haggard but resolute. "We have the weapon," he announced, silencing the chamber. "Now we use it to draw out the real enemy." Nasat representatives erupted in protest, but Kennedy pressed on, outlining his plan to use the Planet Killer as bait. After heated debate, the council agreed. On a distant terraforming colony, Elias Raven crouched in the shadows, watching as a cloaked figure approached the warehouse where they had hidden the prototype. His heart raced as he recognized the figure's gait. The broker. Raven's former mentor stepped into the light, a triumphant smile playing across his features. "At last," the broker said, reaching out to touch the Planet Killer. "The key to fulfilling the Praetorian prophecy." Raven's mind reeled. The pieces were falling into place. The manipulation, the conflict, all orchestrated to bring about a galactic apocalypse that would leave the Praetorians as supreme rulers. As the broker began to interface with the Planet Killer's controls, Raven knew he had to act. The fate of civilizations hung in the balance, and the true battle was only just beginning. Raven's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, a blast of energy knocked the weapon from his hand. The broker, no, Zarin, turned, his eyes gleaming with triumphant malice. "Ah, Elias, always one step behind." A platoon of Praetorian super soldiers materialized around them, their armor gleaming in the colony's artificial twilight. Raven found himself surrounded, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Across the compound, Kennedy's comm crackled to life. "Arthur, we've got incoming. Multiple dropships, Praetorian IFF." Kennedy's heart sank as he watched the sky fill with sleek, deadly vessels. "Defensive positions? Zephyr, get your team to the high ground. We need to buy time. The air soon filled with the sizzle of plasma fire and the acrid smell of ozone. Kennedy's ragtag force fought with desperate intensity, but the Praetorian super soldiers seemed unstoppable. Their enhanced reflexes and impenetrable armor made them formidable opponents. "We can't hold them off forever," Zephyr shouted, her bioluminescence flaring with each precise shot from her rifle. Kennedy's mind raced. They were trapped, outgunned, and rapidly running out of options. His eyes fell on the Planet Killer prototype, its pulsing energy a constant reminder of the stakes. "Serena," he barked into his comm, "I need options. Can we weaponize this thing?" Dr. Valle's voice came back, strained but determined. "Maybe. The Praetorian tech we reverse-engineered, if I can integrate it with the core systems, we might be able to create a localized blast. But Arthur, the power output would be catastrophic. We'd destroy everything within a 100-kilometer radius." Kennedy's throat tightened. It was an impossible choice, but one he might have to make. A new voice cut through the chaos. "This is Zoran Tarakum of the Nasat Imperium. Stand down and surrender the Planet Killer, or face annihilation." Kennedy watched in disbelief as a Nasat strike force dropped from orbit, adding to the melee. The colony had become a three-way battleground, with the Planet Killer as the prize. "Serena, start the modifications," Kennedy ordered. "We might need that option." As the battle raged, Raven faced off against his former mentor. "Why, Zarin? What could possibly justify this?" The broker's, Zarin's, eyes gleamed with fervor. "The prophecy, Elias. The end of all civilizations, and the rise of a new order. The Planet Killer is the key, the harbinger of a glorious new age." Raven shook his head, disgusted. "You're insane." "Insanity is a matter of perspective," Zarin replied coolly. "Now, step aside. Destiny awaits." The fighting intensified. Kennedy's forces were pushed back, meter by meter. The Nasat and Praetorian forces clashed, adding to the chaos. And through it all, the Planet Killer's energy signature grew stronger. "It's ready," Serena's voice came through, tight with tension. "One push of a button, and this whole place goes up in flames, along with everyone in it." Kennedy steeled himself. "Attention all forces," he broadcast on an open channel. "This is Arthur Kennedy. We have armed the Planet Killer. Stand down now, or I'll activate it and take us all out." For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then Zarin's laughter cut through the quiet. "A bluff, Arthur? I expected better." Kennedy's finger hovered over the detonator. Could he do it? Could he sacrifice everyone here to keep the Planet Killer out of enemy hands? Suddenly, the sky lit up. A massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace, energy weapons primed and ready. "This is the Krilnar Consortium," a cold reptilian voice announced. "The Planet Killer belongs to us now. Surrender or be obliterated." Kennedy looked at the detonator in his hand, then at the converging alien forces. Time seemed to slow as he weighed his options, the fate of humanity and all alien species hanging in the balance. Kennedy's finger hovered over the detonator, his mind racing. The converging alien forces, the stakes, the impossible choice. It all crystallized into a moment of clarity. "Serena," he barked into his comm, "can you reconfigure the prototype? We need an EMP, not annihilation." A beat of silence, then her voice crackled back. "An electromagnetic pulse? Yes, I think so. Give me 2 minutes." Kennedy's eyes swept the battlefield. Praetorian troops advanced, their energy shields shimmering. Nasat fighters dove from the sky, weapon ports glowing. And now, the Krilnar ships loomed overhead, casting long shadows across the colony. "We don't have 2 minutes," Zephyr hissed, her bioluminescence pulsing erratically. Kennedy gritted his teeth. "We'll make 2 minutes." He switched to an open channel. "This is Arthur Kennedy. I'm prepared to activate the Planet Killer, but I'm offering one last chance for diplomacy." Zoran Tarkum's voice crackled back, dripping with disdain. "Diplomacy? You hold our technology hostage." "The technology belongs to no one," Kennedy countered, "and its potential goes beyond destruction." A reptilian laugh cut through the air. "Pretty words, human, But the Krillnar Consortium deals in power, not platitudes. The comm crackled, Serena's voice breathless. It's done, the pulse is ready. Kennedy took a deep breath. Then let me demonstrate. He pressed the button. A wave of blue-white energy erupted from the Planet Killer prototype. It swept across the battlefield in an expanding dome, crackling as it passed through combatants and vehicles alike. Silence fell. Praetorian armor locked up, soldiers trapped within. NASAT fighters dropped from the sky, their anti-grav systems offline. The massive Krillnar ships listed, their engines sputtering and dying. Kennedy's own tech was dark, save for the prototype itself. He'd gambled everything on Serena's ingenuity, and it had paid off. What have you done? Zoran's voice was barely a whisper. Bought us time, Kennedy replied. Now we talk. Hours later, Kennedy stood before a hastily convened council session, his voice hoarse but determined. The Planet Killer's potential isn't limited to destruction. Today, we disabled an army without a single casualty. I propose we entrust this technology to the Viziers for safekeeping and further study. Debate raged. Hardliners like Zoran protested, but others saw reason. A fragile ceasefire took hold. Then Kennedy's comm chirped, a coded channel from Earth. His blood ran cold as he listened to the transmission. Damian Blackwood's face filled view screens across the chamber. Citizens of Earth, allies of humanity, it is with a heavy heart that I must inform you of a grave betrayal. Kennedy watched in horror as Blackwood wove a tale of deception, painting him as a rogue agent. The Planet Killer project on Earth was revealed, positioned as humanity's shield against alien aggression. And so, to preserve our security in these dangerous times, I am assuming emergency authority. The chamber erupted into chaos. Alien delegates shouted accusations of human treachery. Kennedy's own team looked at him with a mix of confusion and dawning horror. Arthur? Zephyr's voice cut through the din. We need to move. Now. He nodded, knees going weak. They were trapped here, cut off from Earth, branded as traitors. The Aetheri were their only allies now. As they slipped away from the council chamber, alarms began to blare. Blackwood's loyalists were already moving against them. Kennedy's fists clenched. The real fight was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. Somewhere in the shadows, the broker smiled. Everything was falling into place. The ground shook as Blackwood's forces descended on the colony. Dropships disgorged heavily armed troops, their weapons already blazing. Kennedy sprinted for cover, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. Zephyr, he shouted into his comm. We need an exit strategy. The Aetheri's voice crackled back, tight with tension. Working on it. My warriors are engaging their flank, but we're outnumbered. A deafening explosion rocked the compound. Through the smoke, Kennedy saw the broker's Praetorian assassins materializing, their cloaking fields shimmering as they advanced. Zoran, watch out, Kennedy yelled, but his warning came too late. A Praetorian's energy blade sliced through the air, catching the NASAT diplomat in the side. Zoran crumpled, green blood pooling beneath him. Chaos erupted as the NASAT delegation scattered. Opportunity knocks, hissed a reptilian voice. Kennedy turned to see a Krillnar commander, eyes glinting with avarice. Your Earth forces seem preoccupied. Perhaps we can discuss terms for the prototype's safe retrieval? Kennedy's mind raced. They were running out of options, fast. Serena, he barked into his comm. I need a Hail Mary. Can you reconfigure the prototype again? Into what? Vale's voice was strained, the sounds of battle echoing behind her. A teleporter, one-way ticket to Earth. A beat of silence. It's theoretically possible, but... Do it, Kennedy ordered. We're splitting their focus. As Val worked, Kennedy organized a desperate defense. Zephyr's Aetheri warriors fought with fluid grace, their bioluminescence flaring with each precise shot. But Blackwood's forces pressed relentlessly forward. It's ready, Serena's voice crackled through the comm. But Arthur, this is wildly unstable. We have no idea where exactly... No time, Kennedy cut her off. Do it. A blinding flash lit up the battlefield. When Kennedy's vision cleared, half of the prototype had vanished. Alarms blared from the Earth Force's command center as they registered the sudden energy spike on their homeworld. In the lull that followed, Kennedy's comm chirped, a coded etheric frequency. "Kennedy," Zephyr's voice was low, urgent. "I've arranged a meeting. We have a plan to end this permanently, both prototypes. But we need to move now." Kennedy hesitated, weighing his options. The battlefield stretched before him, a tableau of destruction. Blackwood's forces regrouping, the Krillnar circling like vultures, the remnants of the Galactic Council in disarray. And somewhere out there, the broker watched it all unfold. As if summoned by the thought, a new transmission cut through the chaos. An encrypted channel, one that sent a chill down Kennedy's spine. "Such fire and fury," the broker's silky voice purred. "But what if I told you there was another way? A path to unite humanity and the Praetorians, to stand as equals against the coming storm?" Kennedy's fist clenched. Two paths lay before him, each fraught with danger and uncertainty. Destroy the planet killers and pray for peace, or forge an alliance with humanity's oldest enemy? The weight of worlds pressed down upon him as he prepared to make his choice. Kennedy's finger hovered over the comm, Zephyr's urgent voice still echoing in his ears. The battlefield stretched before him, a tapestry of destruction and chaos. His eyes darted from the regrouping Earth forces to the circling Krillnar ships, then to the scattered remnants of the Galactic Council. The broker's silky voice slithered through his mind once more. A path to unite humanity and the Praetorians. Kennedy's lips pursed. He made his choice. "Broker," he growled into the encrypted channel, "I'm listening." The next few hours passed in a blur of tense negotiations and carefully crafted half-truths. Kennedy found himself agreeing to complete the Earth-based planet killer, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. But with each concession, the promise of peace, however fragile, seemed to solidify. As the final terms were laid out, Zephyr burst into the makeshift command center, her bioluminescence flaring with barely suppressed fury. "Arthur, you can't do this," she hissed, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're handing them the power to destroy worlds." Kennedy's face was a mask of stone. "It's a deterrent, Zephyr. The only way to ensure—" "No!" The ethereal leader's voice cracked like a whip. "I won't let you doom us all." She lunged for the control panel, fingers flying over the interface. Alarms blared as she initiated a shutdown sequence for the prototype. Time seemed to slow. Kennedy saw the flash of steel, heard the whisper of displaced air. Before he could shout a warning, a Praetorian assassin materialized behind Zephyr. The energy blade ignited with a sickening hiss. Zephyr's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a silent "oh" of surprise. She crumpled to the floor, bioluminescence flickering weakly before fading entirely. "No!" Kennedy roared, rushing to her side. But it was too late. Zephyr Starsong, his staunchest ally and friend, lay still in a growing pool of her own luminescent blood. The broker's voice cut through the shocked silence. "A regrettable necessity, I'm afraid. Shall we continue our negotiations?" Kennedy's hands shook as he closed Zephyr's unseeing eyes. He rose slowly, every muscle taut with grief and rage. "You'll have your planet killer," he spat, "and may whatever gods you believe in have mercy on us all." The next weeks passed in a haze of feverish activity. Kennedy returned to Earth, throwing himself into the completion of the planet killer with single-minded intensity. The coup against Blackwood was swift and brutal, leaving Kennedy's loyalists in control of humanity's fractured government. As the final power couplings were locked into place, Kennedy stood before the monstrous creation. Its pulsing energy core seemed to mock him, a testament to humanity's ingenuity and moral failure. A Praetorian overseer approached, mandibles clicking in what passed for satisfaction. "It is time," the alien intoned. "The Galactic Council awaits." Kennedy nodded numbly, following the Praetorian to the waiting shuttle. As they broke atmosphere, he caught sight of the completed planet killer, visible even from orbit, a new star of humanity's own making, as terrible as it was beautiful. The unveiling before the council was a masterclass in fear and intimidation. Kennedy watched as species after species recoiled from the holographic display of the planet killer's capabilities. The Praetorians stood tall, their influence palpable as the new galactic order took shape. In the days that followed, Kennedy found himself going through the motions. He gave speeches about deterrence and mutually assured destruction, each word tasting more bitter than the last. The tenuous peace felt hollow, built on the backs of the dead and the threat of annihilation. Finally, unable to bear the weight of his choices any longer, Kennedy drafted his resignation. He slipped away in the night, leaving behind the trappings of power and the crushing guilt that came with them. On a remote world, far from the centers of galactic power, Kennedy stared at the alien stars. The quiet was oppressive after so long surrounded by the machinations of war and politics. He closed his eyes, but Zephyr's face haunted him, her final moments playing on an endless loop. A soft chime broke the silence. Kennedy's eyes snapped open, focusing on the antiquated comm unit he'd brought as his sole link to civilization. A single message blinked on the screen, encoded in a cipher he thought long forgotten. With trembling fingers, he activated the transmission. A flickering hologram sprang to life. Elias Raven, his face etched with purpose. "Arthur," Raven's voice crackled. "I know you're out there. We need you. The fight isn't over." The message faded, replaced by another recording. Kennedy's breath caught in his throat as Zephyr's image appeared, her bioluminescence dim but steady. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice thick with pain. "If you're seeing this, I'm gone. But you must have faith. The planet killer's reign of fear will end. It has to." The hologram flickered out, leaving Kennedy alone in the darkness once more. He stared at the dead comm unit, mind racing. The flame of hope he'd thought long extinguished flickered to life in his chest. Somewhere out there, Raven and his resistance were taking their first steps against the Praetorian enforced peace. And despite everything, despite the crushing weight of his choices, Kennedy found himself drawn back into the fight. He stood, eyes fixed on the horizon where the first hints of dawn were beginning to break. The galaxy might tremble under the shadow of the planet killer, but the battle for its soul was not nearly finished.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.